Shalom, first and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, double honor to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teaching this truth and sincerity. And shout out to the Akims out there in the four quarters of the earth proclaiming this truth. Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Brakatum. So a lot is taking place since this memorandum of understanding was just signed in last week and then over to Switzerland, right? But then the strait closed again because the Israeli state is still on the scene of things, defying Trump and, still bombing Lebanon, right? Because they were never going to withdraw from Lebanon. In fact, they're going to stay forever. The least of the flock, drawing everybody into this war. Mostly drawing in America into this war that they're trying to get out of. But the Pandora's box has been opened. And this is a war that they can't get out of. And it's a war that they lost. You see, that's the other big one, is that America and the Israeli state failed. They didn't get anything that they wanted out of that, Iran never capitulated. They killed their leader. They killed Ayatollah Khamenei. They killed quite a few generals and still got nothing out of the deal, And embarrassingly, all their bases were destroyed, in all that time. And not only did they spend $80 billion, now Pentagon's asking for an additional $80 billion for this U.S.-Iran war, right? But also just pretty much, and it's really an Israeli war. You see, Israel controls the U.S., and everybody knows that now. That's already come out the surface that, this has nothing to do with U.S. interests. This has to do with Israeli interests in the greater Israel project. Has nothing to do with, securing borders or, stopping mass immigration, all the things that Trump ran on, right? That he doesn't give a shit about that just as long as Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. I don't care about anything else just as long as Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. He changes his tone, then he changes it right back because he went and threatened Iran again. Well, we could still hit them hard, and like everything else, so, going back and forth, going to bomb them to smithereens, going to, wipe out an entire civilization. It's back and forth shit. But we know that the war really is never over. We know that the U.S. and Israeli state have lost the war, but over there, because the U.S. had lost the war so badly, they're looking for a new curator, better security. Well, Putin is going to be a lot more involved. Now, like everything else, though, Ukraine has also been increasing their attacks against Moscow's energy infrastructure, and then Russia's been, of course, retaliating against Kiev, so you got that war going on as well. But nonetheless, though, the Third World War is coming quickly, and it's all there in that valley. But in the meantime, while all this is going on, the dollar is dead, because if there's no oil moving, because, again, nothing's allowed to transit there. They're telling you, Iran is going to lift the tolls for the next 60 days, but the strait is closed. Why? Because the Israeli state will not stop firing on Lebanon. So the strait still remains closed, closed to the west. It's permanently closed, especially to the Israeli state, because it's already come from there, from the officials at Iran. But nonetheless, though, this is what's going on here, that food shortages, right? You're hearing about that. There's a famine coming, because they ain't able to get fertilizer and shortages. And then you got a fire deliberately in Southern California. Yeah, we definitely believe this is manufactured, but a warehouse caught on fire in Southern Cal. A state of emergency has been declared. Well, they declare state of emergencies all the time, right? Nothing really happens of them. Because we know coronavirus was a total hoax, and that was a state of emergency. So, they don't really do nothing. But nonetheless, so supply chains have been destroyed. And so, that's going to cause a lot of shortages everywhere. And people are going to be panicked because this ain't like the 1929 stock market crash. No, this is much worse because it's a bigger, heavier population. People survived the 1929 stock market crash. But what did they do? They went to war. They went to war, and the economy eventually, started to come back, especially during World War II. So, like everything else, though, the Third World War coming quickly.
1% of America's food supply chain was just wiped out.
1%.
An out-of-control fire, potentially a food supply chain attack at a cold storage warehouse in Los Angeles, California. It has been quickly burning for days, prompting authorities in that area to issue a declaration of emergency. And what they have done is said that something bigger is probably happening here. They say that the containment of the blaze is inaccessible at this time. The facility holds 89 million pounds of America's frozen food supply. Now, officials say that the combination of toxic smoke, structural hazards, and the enormous volume of food that is stored inside here in what began as just an unknown warehouse fire has now turned into a complex public health and environmental emergency. Now, you might say, it's just 90 million pounds of food, and that's only 1 to 3% of the nation's overall frozen food supply. And technically, you would be correct. One warehouse fire does not determine the fate of the United States of America. But it only takes a couple more hits in the magnitude that we are seeing to make it so that you and your family do not get the food that you need at the grocery store anymore.
Yep, and with the fertilizer shortages, etc., you can see that this is all well manufactured, well planned. Because, guess what else is being hit, right? Oil infrastructure, being hit. You've seen that even during the war. The Texas oil refinery was set on fire, and then you have Russia's Moscow, because the Russian oil is one of the ones that is allowed to pass through the transit, right? Iran's able to get their oil there. Well, they just got hit by Kiev. So you can see that, indeed, they're going after the world's oil supply, which also controls a lot of things. But now, you're seeing that, most of all, Babylon the Great is about to suffer a catastrophe that they've never seen before, the likes of which no one's ever seen before. 1929 stock market crash ain't even comparable because, again, the population is much more bigger. So like everything else, so, it tells you right here in 2 Ezra chapter 15, verse 12, Egypt shall mourn, and the foundation of it shall be smitten with the plague and punishment that Yahweh shall bring upon it. Well, before he brings that ultimate destruction, that nuclear destruction, the lake of fire, which is what this place will become, well, what's also going to happen? Well, they that till the ground shall mourn, for the seed shall fail through the blasting of hail with a fearful constellation. So what's that talking about? That means that, pretty much so, their crops and everything else are going to fail, meaning that, their food supply, they're going to run out of food. Things are going to get even more scarce here. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh. Yeah, that Pandora's box is open. They can't get out of this war. And now there's more players, and they're looking for a new creator because the U.S. bases have been destroyed. They were completely defeated in this, which is why they begged for the ceasefire to begin with. And another 60-day extension. Pretty much so, they were chased off. Iran, has chased them off, has chased off the bully, stood up to the bully, has wounded the bully big time. So they need a new curator there, a better security guarantee over in the Persian Gulf. They need regime change. They need to get someone better over there that can protect these countries, which means pretty much getting those Israelis out of there and ending this greater Israel project. Well, they're looking to Putin for that. Gomer and all its troops and many more, right? So we're seeing that build up. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and the destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another with swords in their hands, meaning that there's going to be uprisings. Yeah, when everything's out, and pretty much though that you can't get it anymore, because again the storehouse is being found empty. It talks about that as well, that they can't get the food supplies, and the dollar being dead, that it ain't worth anything anyways. What do you think people are going to do? For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another, which shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Yeah, people are going to turn against each other, and right now is not a good time to be a cop because more shameful spewing has been upon them because they've been opening fire way too much lately and been getting a lot of bad coverage, and people are tired of it. They're tired of these authoritarian pigs, because like everything else, so, they've just had enough, and they don't really care anymore, because look, if they can't feed their families or anything, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to, well, it tells you, man shall desire to go into cities, shall not be able. Because of their pride, the cities shall be troubled. Houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. meaning that, okay, pretty much, if you have something, they're going to take it from you. Man shall have no pity upon his neighbors, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of lack of bread and for great tribulation. Yeah. So pretty much, though, you got supplies, you're one of those preppers and all that. Well, they're going to steal it from you. They know who has shit. Everybody's going to be turning against each other. That's what's about to happen. All hell's about to break loose. And we ain't even near that so-called 250th celebration, right? A lot of people are just like, oh, cool, there's an end to this war. The real fools believe everything that's on Fox News and that Trump can make such idle threats, and Trump, sound like he's invincible. I mean, I caught a couple of those Fox News clips, and it can sound pretty convincing, but we know that it's nothing but lies. It's just made it look like, America can do whatever it wants, that they can charge the toll. Yeah, Trump says that only he can determine whether they're going to charge a toll or not. And that they own the strait and that they'll take over Iran, and 20% of the oil. Trump's been talking his shit once again, because that's all they do is talk shit. Yet they got their ass spanked. While it was looking like he was apologetic, he started talking more shit. This flip-flopping back and forth. But that's just it, though. You see, things are not what they seem. And the only thing that he can do is continue to lie. So Fox News, he's got to sound big on Fox News, while the rest of the world sees him as a coward, that he hides behind everything. As Apostle Tahar says, he's shamed everywhere. And he should just retire, while he's ahead, which he ain't ahead. But he should just retire. He's unfit. He's unfit to be a leader, and at least everyone can agree about that, that no, he's not making America great again. He's making America hated again. See, they're the most hated country of all besides the Israeli state. And people are tired of the Israeli state. People are tired of fighting for Israel. They don't want to fight for Israel, and they're saying it out loud with a loud voice. We don't want to fight for Israeli interests. We don't want to fight for the greater Israel project. You got shameful spewing upon Edom because Amalek doesn't share with his brothers. Yeah, the head tribe of Edom does not even share with his brothers, right? So even they hate him. They hate the Zionists, and even they use that term Zionist. So how much more, right? One people shall stand up and fight against another with swords in their hands, because they're tired of everything. And that's all being done on purpose. You see, they're deliberately allowing it to happen. Most High is deliberately allowing it to happen. Most of all, the Most High is in charge. And Esau is Lucille. If you look at it the way of The Walking Dead and Negan, right? That's the Most High's whipping stick, man. And it'll bring you to your knees, man. If you will not worship the Most High and repent, he's going to send Esau after you. I mean, think about what happened last weekend, Lady's dog was shot by the fucking pigs, man, just like that, because of a wellness check. And then you had another incident happen where a German Shepherd was shot. Yeah, these animals are catching hell because of Esau being in power. Because again, now shameful spewing is everywhere, and so this kingdom ain't gonna be around much longer. We're at the end of Esau Edom. We're also at the beginning of the house of David. Salakia for the sun being where it is, but I'm trying to do the best I can. Maybe I should just turn a little bit this way, but then you wouldn't see the sign. Maybe I could just do that. But you see, like everything else though, everything has a time, and again, we're at the end of his kingdom and the beginning of ours, as you can see that his kingdom, is just one more hammer to fall. The hammer of the whole earth is being caught asunder, And, like everything else, though, they're looking for a new curator over there in West Asia, because they know that, well, yeah, those so-called allies, well, they didn't do so good, right? When Iran's retaliatory strikes came, they wiped out just about everything. Those bases didn't even stand at all, because they went after Bahrain, Kuwait, all of them, just totally wiped out. America lost the war, so there's no good curator. But you see, like everything else, though, Russia has been, a guard onto these places, and we're going to see a lot more. They're going to go after the Zionist enemy, because that's what the alliance is. And not to mention, what they won't tell you on the news is that Donald Trump is very, very much trying to become a BRICS member, because he knows that the dollar is dead. But you see, like everything else, though, his handlers will never allow him to become a BRICS member. While he doesn't call it central bank digital currency, he calls it a stable coin. Because he knows the dollar is dead. He's a businessman. He knows it's dead, and he's looking to invest in BRICS. But you see, that's just it. They ain't gonna let him. Because again, its due date is up. All empires rule for 250 years. The big ones do, and eventually, they're done away with. And so, like everything else, Gog and Magog is going to become the new curator there as it goes into Ezekiel 38. Verse 4, I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws and bring thee forth all thine army, horses, and horsemen. Well, you already know Russia's already made an announcement that he wants to rebuild their bases in Syria. And also, Donald Trump, recently just suggested that, Israel can stop fighting Hezbollah. We can get Syria to do it. And Syria's new intern president told him no. No, he's not going to get involved in another war. He wants Damascus and the restoration of Syria. So he's not going to get involved with it. Which is, Hayat al-Sham is part of proxies of Turkey and their interests. And I will bring thee forth all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. That's Russia. Russia's going to be the new curator. Persia, Ethiopia, Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Well, pretty much though. And they're all going to get ready to fight over there in the Valley of Yehoshaphat, where the Most High is leading them. First, they're going to wipe out the Israelis over there, and then eventually they're going to be fighting the angels of the Most High and going to launch their missiles upon Babylon. But this is where the war gets started. Gomer and all his troops, the house of Togarmah and north quarters, and all his troops, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, prepare thyself, thy and all the company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. So, like everything else, though, Russia's going to safeguard these countries, but also going to go after the Israeli state. And then, as he's doing that, Damascus becomes destroyed, and lots of Tel Aviv and the rest of the Israeli state also gets wiped out. And that is from the Third World War that's coming quickly. You see, like everything else, though, the Most High is speeding things up for the elect's sake, because we've been sighing and crying for the abominations here. And while all that's beginning to form, well, you had to have the so-called peace talks, the ceasefires, because, positioning. It's all positioning, but the war is still here. The war ain't over with. It's just, okay, they got to regroup. The U.S. got their fucking ass whipped. Unlike any other time, man. Worse than Vietnam, man. They were losing bases right and left. In Vietnam, they still had bases. Even though their troops were being wiped out, still the bases stood. It's not this time. The bases were totally wiped out. You had soldiers actually hiding out in hotels over there. And even having to duck and cover there in the hotels, too. Because of the retaliatory strikes were so severe. Because they knew where the targets were. You see, like everything else, though, it's a different ball game. This ain't Iraq. This ain't Afghanistan. This ain't Syria. This isn't Venezuela. So Donald Trump, he can talk all this shit, but everybody knows that they got their ass kicked, and they're going to continue to get a punch in the face every time, and you can see that he's put his foot in his mouth so many times. Nobody fucking believes him anymore unless they watch Fox News. Yeah, Fox News paints a different picture that, he's really mad at King Bibi. Right. Yeah, he's mad at Benjamin Netanyahu. Yeah, right. We all know that that's bullshit. That pretty much, though, he has a deal with Gaza, because he made that Gaza peace deal, where he's going to make lots of money. They totally leveled Gaza, but guess what? Tel Aviv was totally leveled by Iran. And you know that Damascus is going to get wiped out soon, too. You see, the Third World War is right around the corner. So they got to push this new system in, right? They got to usher in the new system, and that is, well, if you were able to freely come and go to the grocery store, to get things, then this would never commence. But see, they got to cause the crisis, order out of KO, right? And so they got to cause a crisis, and then they got to regulate everything. You know, you've heard about these government run grocery stores, and that's what they're bringing in. And if you're here in California, you notice that all the shopping carts have been replaced with the wheels as part of the Newsom's war on the homeless. So you put these new wheels on there, so you know the shopping cart can't leave the parking lot. So Wenco, which is you know, had the oldest shopping carts, they're all been changed. You see, and like everything else, so eventually you're not going to be able to access that unless it can sense your RFID chip, because that's what's coming. You see, like everything else, so the systems have been changing for quite some time. They just got to be able to roll it out. Well, if you're going to the storehouses and you find them empty, you know that that's the beginning of things, and that's when all hell's about to break loose. You know, and hey, we the elect, we've been preparing you. We've been telling you for quite some time. What you choose to do with this information is up to you. You know, but only the elect are going to really listen and going to take heed to this. Well, the rest are going to say, oh no, you know, he's got a peace deal and this war is dying down. You know, and they think everything's back to normal, and they're going to go celebrate that 4th of July shit and actually believe it, right? You know, things. You know, oh, well, look, I only paid $4.89 for a gallon of gas. It's coming down. Yeah, people are under that illusion. But guess what, though? They're going to get a punch in the face real soon, especially once they start running out of oil. Because guess what? Even if the Strait were to really truly open, it does not change the last 4 months that it was closed, and all the ships that have empty containers were not able to even transit there. So, and not to mention all of America's oil, the resources that they have has been going to the Israeli state. All of Venezuela's oil has been going to the Israeli state. Yeah, that's how the Israeli state has been able to conquer all those places, been able to take southern Lebanon and Syria, because they got unlimited flows. The U.S. is not getting those imports. They're not getting any of that oil. They're exporting their oil to the Israeli state. You know, not even Europe is getting that oil. You know, pretty much the Israelis are getting it. So everybody knows that the Israeli state is really the head of the U.S. You know, that King Bibi tells Trump what he's going to do. You know, so this bullshit, this shit show of Trump and Bibi not getting along, it's all a dog and pony show. Just like the 2020 election, right? You know, him and Biden not getting along, and it was all just a dog and pony show. You know, they knew that they was going to put in Biden, and they knew that they needed to give him a rest because they just didn't have everything set in place. So they threw Biden as a decoy. You know, hey, the elites, they're the ones that decide who becomes the next president. You know, but they give you the illusion that you voted. You know, so a lot of people are talking about the midterms, right? You know, and that Trump's going to lose a lot of the GOP. Yeah, like they're going to stop him. Like they can stop Trump. Even if the Democrats would take over the House and Senate and bring him up on charges, they cannot stop him. You know, he's the king of Babylon, and the Most High put him there for a reason. You know, and he's an embarrassment too. See, that's another thing. The Most High is making an embarrassment out of Esau, and Donald Trump, you know, takes the Donald, right? He takes the Donald for it. So, you know, Nero's back in the regeneration, and we're back in the regeneration, the house of David, you know, and we're being built up. And we are that new Jerusalem that'll be coming down. You know, we're going to be gathered from the 4 quarters of the earth, especially here in Babylon, from that day of destruction. And then we're going to see this place become a lake of fire. You know, while we're going to be saved scarcely, everybody else is going to see the judgment of the Most High. And he has very heavy judgments, especially to all those that took the MOTB. You know, the mandate, you know, the mark of the beast, you know. And that is an implantable microchip. The microchip is here, and they're going to mandate that. So, like everything else, so we know it's June, you know, to all the naysayers, but guess what, though? It will happen. And when it does, you got a lot of heavy explaining to do. And guess what, though? You'll just cop out, you know, just like all the others copped out. You'll say it's something else, but you still can't teach what it is because you keep changing your mind about it. And then you'll know a true prophet had been among you. But then the Most High is going to seal this, man. He's going to seal his elect. The elect will be sealed, and then there'll be a famine of the word worldwide. You won't be able to find us anymore because at that point we'll be sealed. And that's what we're waiting upon. So we pray that this has been edifying, you know. We pray we're part of that hopeful elect to be saved from this place, man. Because, Make no mistake about it. Regime change is coming. The King of Kings, Yahweh Shai, and the angels are coming to destroy this place, to take all the crowns of the earth from all the kings, you know, and we just pray we're part of his elect. So hopefully this has been edifying for everyone to say Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rekakadash, Wa Abba Babal. Barakatam, Jehovah elect. Shalom.